All right. Welcome to the For We Are Many podcast. My name is Rob, and I'll be your host for this evening. We are reading from Bobby Seale's book, Seize the Time, the story of the Black Panther Party. The link is in the description, no matter which platform that you're listening to this on. We are going to be picking it up today at page 165, the beginning of the chapter, Chicago. Kidnapped, chained, tried, and gagged. Before we get too far into this, I was able to find a Democracy Now! Video, which has Bobby Seale talking about the trial.
Turn to a clip of Bobby Seale speaking in Chicago in 1968 outside the Democratic convention during the protests.
We go forth as human beings to remove these pigs, these hogs in the power structure, murdering and brutalizing people not only here in the confines of racist decade in America, but murdering and brutalizing and oppressing people all out the world. And when we go forth to deal with them, that they're going to always send out their racist, scurvy, rotten pigs to occupy the people, to occupy the community, such as the way they have this park here occupied. Now, in just a second, there's a lesson that Minister of Defense Huey P. Newton teaches, that whenever the people disagree with the political decisions that's been made upon their heads, that whenever the people disagree with those political decisions, the racist power structure sends in guns and force to see that the people accept those political decisions. But we are here as revolutionaries to let them know that we refuse to accept those political decisions that maintains the oppression of our black people and other people in the world.
That was Bobby Seale, the founding chairman of the Black Panther Party, speaking at one of the demonstrations in the early days of the Chicago Democratic National Convention protest. And I want to welcome Bobby Seale to the program. And Bobby, one of the parts of the history of the Chicago demonstrations that's left out is that it wasn't just young white people. Obviously, the Black Panther Party was involved. The Young Lords of Chicago were involved as well in the protest. Could you talk about how the various groups managed to come together outside the Democratic National Convention that year?
We were all about coalition politics anyway. This is one of the factors that I injected into my organization relative to Dr. Martin Luther King, Dr. Reverend Ralph Abernathy calling me before Dr. King was killed to help join with him and them to do the Poor People's March for greater economic rights. Coalition politics was the main character of where we were coming from. So the Young Lords, et cetera, and others, I mean, the real Rainbow Coalition started with the Black Panther Party and the Young Lords and the Young Patriots. Young Patriots were young white students out of the Appalachian Mountains and the mining companies, et cetera. And we were all coalesced, all the ethnic groups, et cetera. And that's where we were coming from. But when I spoke at Lincoln Park, one of the things I stated there, because I had seen on television before I arrived there that it was a police riot. And I was telling them that power of the people is the ability to define phenomena, then in turn make it act in a desired manner. So the phenomena of the racist police coming upon you, peaceful protesters, unarmed, et cetera, and beating on you, you're going to have to try to struggle and move around and try to see if you can grab that billy club out of one of them's hand and beat them back, therefore making them act in a desired manner. My point was that itself, when I made that statement, they had pulled me back to the Chicago trial a year later, and the DA tried to say, you meant kill the police, right, Bobby? I says, no, I meant defend ourselves, you know. But my point is the whole mess of even charging us, me and others, with interstate transportation. You know, it was based on the Rapp-Brown law, you know what I mean, that had been pigeonholed. But after Dr. King was killed, so many riots happened, the Congress pulled it out and made it a law. You can't use interstate transportation or use interstate highways to cross state lines with the intent to incite a riot. I spoke at Lincoln Park. Next day, I spoke at Grant Park across the street from the Conrad Hilton Hotel. Half the people of the 400 or 500 people that met, half those people were all in suits like they were delegates, you know, to the convention. Nobody rioted, you know what I mean? And then, of course, I left and went back to Oakland, California, organizing chapters and branches around the country of my organization.
I want to read from a December 1968 copy of Life magazine on the police violence during Chicago in the protests against the DNC. The cover of the issue reads, quote, Walker report discloses the police rioted at the Democratic Convention. An article in the issue quotes a police transmission that captured what police officers said on their radios. Quote, we've got an injured hippie. That's no emergency. Kick the effer. Knock his teeth out. Just an example of what was going on then. Now, Bobby, you didn't get arrested there at the convention, right? You were there for the first 2 days. In fact, you were a last-minute stand-in for Eldridge Cleaver, is that right? Why did you come to Chicago?
Yeah, well, that was the reason. Eldridge Cleaver's parole officer would not let him leave the state of California, so Eldridge called me up at Ramparts Magazine, where he worked at the time, and asked me to take his place. So I called all my people, et cetera, to get some airline tickets, what have you, et cetera. And we flew to Chicago because I went there with an entourage, you know what I mean, et cetera. In fact, we were armed. You know, those are the days we could still carry guns on the plane, you know what I mean? And a lot of times we moved around very armed because we had over 3,500 threatening letters over the years that I had given to our lawyers to make sure, because they never could tell when they were going to attack us and stuff like this here. But I'm just saying, when I was arrested for New Haven, Connecticut, the other trial. I was out on bail for the Chicago trial, and they arrested me at another point. And when the trial came, I'm in jail the whole period of the trial that I was there, the 7 months that I was protesting in the courtroom. And the other 7 defendants are not in jail because they are, you know, they didn't have a capital charge like I had, you see, in New Haven, Connecticut.
I just want to go back to that because you've mentioned the trial. I mean, this was an enormous deal, especially for young people who aren't aware of what took place in 1970. Again, you were arrested months after the protests and charged with conspiring to riot, Bobby, and you were part of the Chicago 8. Explain what happened. And then you were severed from the case.
I was severed from the case, but I was in jail for another charge. I was never in jail for Chicago, the charges of Chicago. Mm-hmm. I never had to go to jail. I posted bail when they first charged me. I was never arrested in jail. I returned from Scandinavia. I was 12 days in Scandinavia, Norway, Sweden, Finland, what have you, et cetera, speaking and lecturing. And while I was there, the indictment against me came down. I was very shocked when I hit Finland because people kept telling me, and it was probably underground CIA agents in all these places I spoke. Says, are you gonna go to Helsinki, Finland? I says, yeah. Well, you know, when you get to Helsinki, Finland, you're only 125 miles from Leningrad. Boom. I says, later, I ain't interested in no Leningrad because I wasn't. I didn't like the USSR. At all, because even when I got there, they interviewed me at some press conference at some parliament place, and I did not care for the state-controlled command economy socialism concepts related to it. I like democratic socialism concepts rather than that. But I'm just saying,
But when you were actually in the trial, when you were in the courtroom, explain what happened. Explain what Judge Hoffman did in having you bound to a chair and gagged.
Well, he tried to be bound after 6 weeks of protesting in the courtroom. What I was protesting is that I had put a motion in before the trial started in jail. In other words, I got the right to call my lawyer, Charles Gary, who was in the hospital. The judge was trying to push consular on me. But when I got my lawyers to dictate to me over the phone, I wrote out the motion with carbon copies. And then when they brought me into to court, before the trial actually started, I asked to step to the lectern to read a motion. And I did, to the right to defend myself, et cetera, and so on, et cetera. And the judge denied it. And then we get in an argument. The Sixth Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America say I have a legal right to my choice of my lawyer, and you cannot push consular on me. So that became part of my strategy against the very trial, while at the same time, remember, I'm charged with conspiracy to commit murder, which is a trumped-up FBI operation in Connecticut that I have to later face after I finish the Chicago trial. That's the reason I'm in jail. I'm not in jail because of Chicago. I'm just saying, so I argued in the courtroom every time. Every time my name was mentioned, I would jump up and interrupt the whole thing. I object. My lawyer's not here. He's mentioning my name. Sit down, Mr. Seal, the judge would say. And I would say no. And I would argue. And then I remember the judge one time says, did you talk to the court recorder and asked her, did she get that? I says, yes. I said, did you get mine too, ma'am? She says, yes. I says, thank you very much. And then turned right back around and told her, you're a racist, a fascist, and a bigot, you know. So that was the argument with me. And I run that all the way through. Ultimately, those contempt cards and everything was totally thrown out. In fact, everybody who was convicted, they even convicted the lawyers of contempt, et cetera, of us. But when it got to the higher circuit courts threw all that crap out. Judge Julius Hoffman violated all our rights. Another man. And then the last day of gagging, I was bound up, my head. The only thing you could see is my eyes and my nose. I was bound up with ace bandages. You know, the ace bandages you put around the knees when you're playing basketball and stuff that tighten up. That's what I was, and then right around here, all the arteries that's going down. And they brought me in the courtroom. My arms are strapped down my legs are strapped to the legs of the big, heavy wooden chair the last day of gagging. And when I got in, I mean, I was losing blood pressure, circulation, and it caused a big commotion in the room. And then the judges would take him out, and they tried to pick me up in this heavy chair, 3 guards, and the big guard started beating me in the head. Jerry Rubin jumped up out of his chair. Abby jumped up out of their chair trying to help me. Guards slammed them back in their chair. I'm trying to turn my hand over, my right hand over, to get my fingers up to the top of the gag, and then the other guard would turn my hand down and then hit me and knock me back, you know, and stuff like this. They really brutalized me. Then they lost balance with this chair. 2 guards in the back and one the big guard in front. And then they start stumbling, and then against the wall were 2 rows of artists in metal folding chairs, and the chair fell into all of those chairs, and I'm on my back, and then I get up and I get the guard down, and then I shouted out because this big guard had fell on me, and his elbow hit me right in the testicles. And I shouted out, "You hit me in my balls, MF." You know, it's shocked right in the courtroom. Now there's 100 people in this courtroom. One side is all the straight people. The other side is all us yippies, hippies, our rainbow coalition of everything, Black Panthers, whoever, etc. And that was it. And they're taking me out into the lockup just outside the courtroom. And I'm telling these guards, I'm going to take all you to court. You violated the 8th Amendment of the Constitution, subjecting me to cruel and unusual punishment, beating me, take you and Judge Julius Hoffman, etc. to the court. Do you know what happened? That court recorder first had typed Bobby Seale saying, "You hit me in my testicles," shout out. Judge Julius Hoffman had that court recorder change that, and she says, put it in the form of Jerry Rubin saying, "Don't hit me in my testicles," you know, etc. And that's really it.
Well, Bobby, we're going to break, but we're going to come back to this discussion. Bobby Seale describing what happened to him in the Chicago 8 conspiracy trial. He was severed from that trial when he was bound and gagged on the orders of the judge in the Chicago 8 trial. He was the only African-American defendant, and it wasn't lost on people as he was tied to that chair. Ultimately, all the charges were dropped against everyone. When we come back, we continue with the former co-founder of the Black Panther Party, Bobby Seale, speaking to us from Oakland, and Bill Ayers, as well as Bernie.
All right. I just figured that since a video existed of him telling that story, that the best option as an accompaniment to what we're about to read was to hear it in his own words. So it's been a pretty busy week for the website. We have a few things to plug. There's a March for Medicare for All. It's happening, and last I knew it was in 52 cities. It could still be higher than that now. On Saturday, I believe every march that I've seen so far has been 10 a.m. to noon local time. You know, some places have some high-profile speakers. Some places have completely unknown speakers, but the message is the same. We need healthcare. We're done, you know, trying to act like vote blue no matter who is going to get us health care, because very clearly it's not. It's time to take to the streets and demand it. But we have an article on the website about the March for Medicare for All. We also have an article supporting the strikers of Frito-Lay in Topeka, Kansas. I was able to locate a strike fund today. The link to that is in there. Yeah, I think that's it. Monday, we'll have our usual current event stream. Tuesday will be part 2 of our Communist Manifesto book club. And Wednesday will be a piece on Emma Goldman. And then, of course, Thursday will be the follow-up to this, part 11 of the Black Panther Party. Are you there, Trisha?
Yeah, I just had my mic on mute because I was talking to Mom.
Gotcha.
Thank you. It's dinner time. It's always about that time when we start recording stuff or going live. So here I am with plates of food in my hand.
Right on.
So my apologies for being a couple minutes late there. I literally had just got out of the shower. I lost track of what day it was. I thought today was Wednesday. I thought we were going to pre-record some stuff for tomorrow, and it is tomorrow.
Sure is. Sure is.
Well, it's Thursday. I thought it was Wednesday. Yeah.
That's okay. We don't have
issues,
anything till Monday. We can actually get ahead for next week.
Sweet.
Oh man.
That was the plan. I just thought it was Wednesday. I don't know, man. The days are just running into each other anymore.
It happens, man.
It does. It does, but yeah. At least managed to get in here quick enough to hear almost all of that video I'm glad you found that interview with him, because hearing that from him directly, that's necessary. Part of why we're reading this book, to find out what really happened in their own words, you know? So thank you for putting that video on.
Yeah, I usually try to, you know, start it with a shorter video, but when I came across that one, I was like, well, I mean, it's like 15 minutes long, but fuck, it's worth it.
Right. Right. It's fitting, especially when that's the chapter that we're getting to right now, is him discussing what happened there. So.
Right. Anyway.
Perfect intro.
The link to the book, if you don't already have an open, that are in the description. We are on page 165.
It was cool when I opened up the file in Drive, it immediately opened right back up to where we left off. I was like, sweet, I don't even have to scroll.
Hell yeah. So who's going first?
Do you want to go first while I eat my tortellini, and then I'll jump in?
Sure.
Thank you.
On the evening of August 19th, 1969, we were returning from the wedding of Ray Masai Hewitt, our Minister of Education, and Shirley Needley, one of the sisters in the party. The wedding had been held at the Berkeley Free Church, which is about a half a mile from national headquarters. After the ceremony was over, we all piled into Eldridge's car, the one with the telephone in it, and headed back towards the office. We were just about 3 blocks from the office when a car sped up from our left and swerved in front of us and stopped at the light. The people in the car all seemed to be looking at us through the rearview mirror. Those cats look like, Masai was saying, pigs! June Hilliard finished the sentence for him. June was driving. I looked to the right and saw a Volkswagen blocking the entrance to the service station at the corner. 2 other cars came up on our rear. There's pigs all around us and unmarked cars, June said. All of a sudden, the doors of these cars opened and agents and policemen began to flood out into the street from all directions. They were running towards our car yelling, "Get out of the car, get out of the car." They were holding 38 revolvers, 357 Magnums, and shotguns on us. There were at least 15 cops surrounding us. If they're gonna shoot, they might as well start shooting because we're just dead, I thought. They were still screaming, "Get out, get out!" Then I thought they were just gonna search the car for weapons and thought it was good we didn't have any if they weren't gonna shoot us after all. Well, I mean, to be fair, if they had been carrying guns, then we all know that they would have been brandishing them at that point. Anyway, June had gotten out of the car, but the car began to roll because the emergency brake wasn't on. Masai got out of the car also, and I hollered to June to pull up the emergency brake. The door on the side where Shirley was snatched open, and a cop pointed a gun in and said, "Get out, this is the FBI, out of the car." Well, they're going to harass us and arrest us. That's what it's all about, I said to myself. When June had gotten out of the car, he had been pushed around away from the door. One of the agents reached in and grabbed the emergency brake. I watched him as he snatched it up. Then he pointed a gun at me and said, "All right, Seal, get out." I pulled the lock latch off, opened the door, and stepped out with my hands hanging down at my sides, palms open, looking at him, cursing with everything I could think of, because at that point, all I could see and think was a form of general harassment. Readily, someone said, "Hands over your head and turn around." They grabbed my shoulders, spun me around, and pushed me towards the car. They began to pat search me, and one cop snatched my right arm and pulled it back and put a handcuff on it. Another snatched my left arm and pulled it back from across the trunk of the car and twisted the back of my hands toward my back and said, "Let's go. Let's get out of here." They had guns in their hands and were pushing me around. They didn't show me any identification, and there must have been 15, 20 more police and plainclothesmen there. They all had guns. Some were even dressed in blue jeans, t-shirts, and short-sleeve shirts. I didn't see any uniforms. I was rushed into a car and stuck in the back seat, an agent on each side of me. Three of them got in front with shotguns and they drove towards San Francisco. One agent said, "I'm informing you of your rights." He told me everything except that I had a right to contact my lawyer. They asked me if I had anything to say. I didn't answer. They were talking to each other. They were giggling with each other, saying this was so easy. In my estimation, they were getting some kind of erotic sensation. They got on the radio and said, "All Berkeley police units and other units surrounding the Berkeley house," I'm assuming that they were referring to the house where I live, "can leave. We have the suspect in custody." That's fucked. I was brought to the San Francisco City Jail and booked. Prior to the booking and after I took everything out of my pockets, the FBI took my little phone book away from me. That was my property. They didn't give it back to me at all. I don't know where it is now. I looked around them and one of the FBI pigs said, "Now I've informed you of all of your rights." And I said, "You haven't informed me of all of my rights." "Yes, I did. I did it in the car." "No, you didn't. You're a liar and you know it. You have not informed me of all my rights." Then I noticed another pig standing there. I'd seen his face before a number of times at press conferences and speaking engagements. I know his face very well because one time at a press conference, I walked up to him and I asked if he was a government agent. "No," he said, "I don't have anything to do with the government. I'm just a newsman. Can I come to this press conference?" "Sure you can," I said. "I just want to expose you if you were an agent, so the rest of the newsmen can let people know that there are agents and provocateurs working for the government all around us who want to take things out of context and tell lies." Well, he was one of those cats. From everything I gathered, he must have been an FBI agent because he was there at the jail when they dropped me off. "Haven't I met you somewhere before?" I asked him. He looked at me and just grinned. He really thought he was Superman. You can look at a cat and see how he's psychologically goofed up with Superman notions, so brainwashed that he thinks he's defending the so-called free world. There is no free world. How in the world can America be free when somewhere between 40 and 50 million poor, oppressed people are living at and below subsistence levels? The dude was grinning and he said, "Yeah, you might have seen me before. I've seen you at a couple of press conferences I've had. And you got exposed by some of the legitimate members of the press. That's where I've seen you before. And then you denied that you were an agent for the FBI or that you were a member of any racist organization." "Well, Bob, that's how it goes," with a shitty grin on his face. I guess he thought he was James Bond or some great white hunter. They tried to get me to sign a statement. No, I'm not signing that. Then they tried to get me to sign something else. I don't know whether it was an attempt to get me to sign some stupid crap about waiving extradition rights or whatever it was. I'm not signing anything. I don't have to sign anything. They took my fingerprints and a mugshot and told me to go down the hall and they would give me a cell. I walked down there and spoke to a black cop who said he was a member of the Officers for Justice. He told me to sit down and I sat down in a little office there. He offered me a cup of coffee and I drank it. I was rather tired and wanted to go to sleep. I knew that I'd have to wait overnight before getting bailed out, so he gave me some blankets, put me in a cell, and I fell off to sleep. The first indication I had that I was being railroaded on some trumped up charge in connection with that Connecticut frame up, what I call a criminal agent, Mission Impossible, Mission Imperialism, domestic, plot to try and destroy the Black Panther Party, was after I'd been handcuffed on Shattuck Avenue in Berkeley. They were walking me toward a car. They said, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and conspiracy to kidnap and murder in connection with Connecticut." What are these damn fools doing now? I thought straight off. Now these cats are out of their minds. And for unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, as they put it. I lay on my bunk in jail and I said to myself, these damn fools trying to railroad me. They're trying to railroad everybody they can out of the party. They're trying to stop the party from functioning. We knew it was coming, but now they're going to try and trump up something else, and of course on me. I expect to be attacked by the pigs in the government because we know that where we're going is correct and will expose the power structure for its continued oppression of the people. Charles Gary came in about an hour later and they woke me up. I had made a call to the Black Panther Party headquarters before I went down to the cell and told them that I was in the San Francisco City jail, so they'd know where to send Charles. Charles Gary came in and we started smiling at each other because we knew that the racist cops had really gone overboard in their attempts to try and destroy the party and its leadership. The next day, I was taken over to the federal building. It was the day after the arrest. McTurnan, Gary's partner, came in to see me, and I said, well, have to post the bail, won't we? Yeah. Well, let's just get a bail. We'll go from there. They really didn't have a warrant yet. The next day, they still didn't have a warrant. I appeared in the federal court in front of a U.S. commissioner, and McTurnan argued that a bail of $25,000 was too high, and that I hadn't fled anywhere to avoid prosecution. McTurnan
You want me to take over?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. McTurnan said that I was watched 24 hours a day, that I'd been in the public eye continually, making speaking engagements on TV in Los Angeles, speaking to 4,000 people at the National Committee to Combat Fascism convention, holding press conferences everywhere, even in that very building. So what did the government mean by claiming that I was fleeing to avoid prosecution? The commissioner said he had no jurisdiction over that and could only set the bail, which he said would be $25,000. So I went back to the cell in the federal building. I could see a whole crowd of San Francisco policemen and also what looked like plainclothesmen coming up with prisoners. At that point, I couldn't tell whether they were local San Francisco plainclothesmen or federal marshals. They were running around in a frenzy and trying to look over at me every once in a while. They'd shake their heads and all this kind of stuff and run around. 2 hours after that, the first appearance in the federal court, I was called back again and bail was posted. $25,000 in a cashier's check. And at that point I said, good, now I can get out of here and get this crap straight and go to Gary and talk and everything. Charles was in the middle of the Warren Wells shootout trial, so McTurnan was substituting for him. When I got ready to leave the commissioner's court, the marshal said, will you step back here first? I thought to myself, now wait a minute, they've already booked me. They repeated, step back here. I remembered that the last time I was there for the Chicago thing, when I posted bail, I had to come back through there, and I thought that was where they processed you out. But no sooner had I gone back than they said, well, you can wait in the cell right there. So I stepped back into the cell. The door was still open, and 30 seconds later, a cop in plainclothes walked back and said, I'm from the San Francisco Police Department, and you're under arrest. What kind of crap is this? I said to myself. These cats are really out to railroad me. I just got through posting bail. What the hell are they going to arrest me for now? They brought me back and put me in the city jail. They said they had a warrant from Connecticut on the trumped-up charges of murder, conspiracy to murder and kidnap, but they didn't actually get it until several days later. As soon as they had me in the county jail, they dropped the phony unlawful fight charges. They just used that as a pretext to kidnap me. Gary had put in a subpoena to get an assistant to Attorney General John Mitchell to appear, but the judge revoked the subpoena, which I didn't dig. Here you are. You need to be able to subpoena somebody and get some information and try to find out who's plotting what. But the power structure in the courts operate like that. They stick together against an individual who has certain rights. You have to have a right to subpoena a person. I don't give a darn if it's the President of the United States. He should be subpoenaed. The reason we had subpoenaed one of Mitchell's assistants was that McTurnan attempted to call the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., and ask them some questions concerning the Chicago case that they had against me. They told him on the phone that this Assistant Attorney General, Victor Warheed, was in Connecticut. Warheed is the head of the Special Panther Unit in the Justice Department.
They had a Panther unit, yo?
Yeah. Ain't that unreal, man? Like, holy fuck. That was about a week before I was arrested, which puts the federal government there in Connecticut, working in conjunction with the state and local officials of New Haven and Connecticut to plot this thing against me. So, naturally, we wanted to have him in court as a means of bringing out some of these erroneous charges. It also came to light in court the next day that there was no warrant out for me when I was arrested, but they had used this, quote, unlawful flight to avoid prosecution bullshit charge to hold me. It didn't make any difference. They set a date for extradition, and I was put in the San Francisco County Jail, which is on the floor above the city jail. I sat up there for 3 weeks, and Gary visited me when he could, and McTiernan would visit me and give me information. A few days after all this, McTiernan came up and told me that it looked like Gary might have to go to the hospital. I'd have to send in a motion to Chicago that I wanted to have my lawyer, Gary, as the only lawyer to represent me. He was the one lawyer I had chosen and the only one I had conferred with. I was to respectfully ask the court to postpone the date of the trial to a later date until my lawyer could appear. I also signed a document by which I was informed that it was mandatory that Gary go into the hospital before he try another case, unless he wanted to risk his life. Gary came to see me a couple days later, and he told me that he had been in Chicago and that the judge had denied a postponement. He said the judge was going to try and choose a lawyer for me. That's illegal.
Yep.
So to Chicago in
chains. I was sitting in San Francisco County Jail. I'm sorry, were you gonna?
I was just gonna say, like, nice announcer voicement there. To Chicago in chains. Okay, go for it, man.
I was sitting in San Francisco County Jail one evening when Charles Gary rushed in and said, "They're gonna move you tomorrow." Tomorrow? They can't move me. They're not supposed to move me if I'm waiting for an extradition hearing. They're plotting a whole operation to get me to Chicago and try to extradite me from there. I know that rotten Mayor Daley is going to see to it that the state of Illinois extradites me to Connecticut. Before Gary left that evening, I told him, "Look, man, when I get to Chicago, I'm not letting those cats choose a lawyer for me, someone I've never spoke to. They don't have any right to do that. I think I'll be better off defending myself if you can't make it there." He said, "Well, we'll have to confirm it, but it looks like I'll have to go to the hospital for a gallbladder operation. All the other cats have lawyers." I said, "The only thing I'll agree with those other lawyers on is that they can handle my pretrial motions, but the only person I'll go into court with is you. The judge will have to see my point of view because I'm going to fire any appointed lawyers. I'm not going to let the judge choose anybody else for me either." Gary said, "Okay, you have the legal right to do that." And he also told me that I had a right to request a lawyer of my choice. The sheriff and the jailers didn't know anything about my being moved. So I told them that I wanted to shower early in the morning and that I wanted to get all cleaned up because I was being taken out. At first they kept telling me I didn't know what I was talking about, but later they allowed me to take a shower and shave. I packaged what little property I had, cigarettes. Wow. You know, it's
Right. Back when you used to be able to actually keep your cigarettes in jail so you could smoke.
Right.
Yeah, not no more. That used to be something you could get from commissary.
Right. Cigarettes, writing paper, handkerchiefs, etc., and put it in a box, tied it up, and took everything out of my pockets. After I was dressed, they put a chain around my wrist. It had a little clip on it with an extra piece of 7-inch chain hanging down. Then they put 2 sets of handcuffs through one of the links in the chain and put both sets of cuffs on me. Then they brought out 2 more prisoners and put some leg irons on all of us. I had a leg iron on the left leg attached to another prisoner's right leg and a leg iron on my right leg attached to the other guy's left leg. They walked us to the elevator like that, took us down to the basement and put us in a federal government paddy wagon. 3 of the guards got in front with their pistols drawn and 2 more got in back with shotguns. What the fuck, dude?
Militarized police much?
Yeah, I mean, like, that sounds like Guantanamo. This is on American soil, ladies and gentlemen.
Like, why do they need to have their pistols drawn in the paddy wagon?
And why did they have to have 2 in the
How
back with
scared are
shotguns?
you?
Right.
Like, how fucking scared are they of, oh my God, we have Panther in custody. Dude, That's just insane overkill there to be brandishing like a motherfucker just to transport somebody.
Yeah.
Anyway.
They drove us over to the federal building where they took our chains off, then put them right back on again. We had the same type of chainage around the waist with double handcuffs and leg irons on. The cat who sat in the middle had leg irons on both legs, so each day throughout the trip we would trade places. The leg irons cut at your legs. I happened to have boots on, and I persuaded the guards to put the irons around the boots so they wouldn't cut my legs. The two other prisoners caught it a little more. They caught it real bad. Their irons were way down on their legs, and if somebody happened to accidentally pull the chain, it would cut into your skin. They hustled us into a regular car, a sedan, put a shotgun on the floor, and one of the cats sat on the right-hand side in front, and the other marshal sat on the left-hand side and drove. Huh. They drove out through a city as we went up the ramp on the freeway and started toward the Bay Bridge. A highway patrolman was right there and he fell in behind us. As we went by the main police station, another highway patrolman got in front of us. That's how we went across the bridge. At the toll plaza, a third highway patrolman pulled in behind us. Then we headed north on I-80 to Sacramento. One of the other prisoners was a white guy named George, and they were taking him back to a Midwestern federal pen. He had been in some big shootout on the West Coast. They were taking him to a maximum security prison because he had already escaped once. That's what he and the marshals started talking about as we were going north towards Richmond and Vallejo. The third prisoner was a young cat named Joe who had supposedly robbed a payroll. After the robbery, he had walked up to an airline's office and asked for a ticket on the next plane going to Canada. When he was told there were no planes going to Canada right away, he asked where the next plane was going. So he said Mexico. Or they said Mexico. So he said, give me a ticket on that right away. He had a bag full of money, and the way he told it, he took the money right out of it and paid for the ticket. He flew out and was picked up a few months later. He's a white cat, of course. If a black man had asked for a ticket to Canada and then a ticket completely in the other direction that just followed and just reached into a bag of money, he would have been surrounded by police in a minute. That just goes to show you how the racism in this society is, the way people's minds function. They were taking him to a federal medical center for some kind of observations. He was supposedly considered wacky. What he did was walk into a department store and say, give me your payroll, and then walk out. But if he had been a black man, it wouldn't be wacky. He'd be dead or railroaded into prison. While we were going past Berkeley on the freeway, and for the next 10 or 11 miles after we got out of Richmond, 5 highway patrol cars were escorting the whole scene. Most of the cars had 2 cops inside. Why so much overkill? Holy fuck.
Right, they acted like he was a much bigger threat than he really was. You know, and that's the thing. That shows just how authoritarian they wanted to be in response to black men who actually carried guns to protect themselves from police brutality.
Right. George got to talking to the marshals and he said, you know, I want to escape. I escaped before, and if I get a chance, I'm going to do it again. And the marshal said, yeah, we know it, and talked about the way in which they transport prisoners. I didn't have much to say at all to anyone at that point. All the marshals would say to me were things like, well, when it comes down to it, what you want to eat? They had to stop at hamburger stands. That's all we ever got. $1 a meal was allocated to us. Usually we got a hamburger, a milkshake, and maybe some French fries, and that'd be about it. Just to think, $1 bought that. A hamburger,
great, the spending power difference.
Yeah, right.
Right.
A hamburger, a milkshake, and some French fries. We'd eat with our handcuffs on in the back seat. We weren't chained to the inside of the car because there's a federal law against that. You want to pick it back up?
Sure. As we drove on, I watched the countryside. I always liked the outdoors until it became too vicious when crazy, trigger-happy hunters killed people while deer hunting. My father used to take me to the mountains when I was younger. I wasn't really too hip to it because we were really living in poverty, but every time my father would make a little bit of money, he and his friends would go hunting. All I wanted to do then was go hunting with them. I did a lot of traveling up and down the state of California, from LA to Mount Shasta. As we drove, I saw landmarks that I knew, and places where I had done farm labor work when I was young. After Sacramento, we drove through Marysville, a small town where I had once been picked up in a railroad station when I was 17 years old. I had jumped a freight train with Steve Broomfield. We were in the state together, hitchhiking around for 2 or 3 weeks at a time without any aid from anybody and living on wild fruit and stuff like that. When we were picked up in Marysville, we were on our way to South Dakota because we identified with the American Indians. My mother is part Indian. We wanted to see the Black Hills where Custer had gotten his head whipped by Sitting Bull and the Blackfoot Sioux, who roamed those areas of Montana, Wyoming, and the Dakotas. When Steve and I were picked up, we stayed overnight in a juvenile detention place until my father came and got us out. The marshals stopped us in Maryville, and we ate there. Not us. The marshals stopped in Maryville, and we ate there. The marshals let us sit down at a table and eat. One of them asked me what I considered a silly question. He said, "You guys want to eat out here? Some guys don't like to let other people walk up and see them chained down and everything." "Man, it don't make me no difference," I said. "I'm a political prisoner. It's up to these cats here." They said they didn't care either, so we sat out there and ate for about 20 minutes. At that time, I didn't know it, but Alan Brodsky, one of Charles Gary's partners, had been arguing in court back in San Francisco for me, and the judge had ordered that I not be taken to Chicago. The U.S. Marshal kept on stalling. He said I was gone and they couldn't get in touch with our car. All they had to do was contact the highway patrol escort, which followed us all the way to the Nevada border. I did notice that once when we stopped, the marshal who was in charge made a phone call. This was around noon. The judge had given the order at 11 a.m. I found out later, and at noon we were still in California. Legally, I could have been taken back to San Francisco. The marshal must have called San Francisco because the next morning after he got us out of jail in Reno, he told me that a lawyer had gone to bat for me yesterday and had done a pretty good job. He asked me if I knew Al Brodsky. I go to the bathroom with leg irons and handcuffs on, or to go to the bathroom with leg irons and handcuffs on as a motherfucker. The other two guys have to wait. We were all still chained together with the leg irons. There's a little play on the chain that drops down from the chain around your waist. You have about 7 inches to move your hands up and down. The handcuffs are attached to the 7-inch chain. After I opened my pants and urinated, I would step to the side and let the other guy go, and then the third guy, and then we'd go on around. One of us would slowly hobble to the face basin and bend real close. We'd have to get right up on it and get the water turned on and wash our hands. If the towels weren't too high, we could reach up and pull the towel. But if it was too high, the marshals who were watching us had to get the towels. That was the kind of situation I was in for 7 days on the way to Chicago. You just couldn't sit on the toilet if you had to. The only place I could have a bowel movement was inside the jails where we were left overnight. The first night we stayed in a very filthy jail in Reno. I was put in a one-man cell by myself. There was only one little blanket full of holes, a bunk attached to the wall, and a foam rubber mattress, about 2 inches thick. Before I was put in that jail, I told the marshal that I wanted to call my lawyer because no one knew where I was. All he had to say was, "Well, we'll see about it." "Don't I have the right to call my lawyer?" I asked. "We'll have to see about it," he repeated. He didn't see about anything. So every day throughout the whole trip, I asked to call my lawyer and was never allowed to do so. Also illegal. In the Reno jail, one of the trustees, a brother, came around. I tried to talk to him, but the guard was looking. It flashed into my mind that maybe the trustee was allowed visitors, and I could get him to tell somebody to call Oakland and tell my lawyer where I was. The guard was still looking at me, and when the trustee saw me trying to talk to him, he shook his head slightly. So they're onto you. The next day, we were chained again, drove all the way across Nevada, eating lunch midway across the state. We were again escorted by state police cars, one in front and one in back. During the day, I had one short conversation about what the Black Panther Party is all about. Both the marshals were white, and Joe and George were white dudes also. I ran down the 10-point platform and program, and afterwards, they asked questions. I tried to show them all the misconceptions about the party that had been printed in the establishment news media. We drove across Nevada, through the Salt Flats, into Utah to Salt Lake City, where we were placed in a jail overnight. Each time we were taken inside a jail, they took off the handcuffs and chains, booked us and mugshots. Every jail except for a few, like one in Wyoming in a small town in Hays, Kansas. All the way to Salt Lake City, I thought of the Mormons and the Lowell Jensen, the district attorney in Alameda County who prosecuted Huey. Jensen is a Mormon. I thought about their racism. If Jensen at all represented their outlook, these people were rather backwards too, with racism manifested in them. I went over in my mind the facts I knew about the Mormons. For one thing, they say black people cannot go to their heaven. A few black people are stupid enough to join their church, but they're treated no better than slaves or animals. Their avowed concept of a race category shows the basis of their supremacy doctrine. This idea has survived from the old one-headed God system of Europe. In Salt Lake City, I saw the Mormon symbol everywhere. There were pictures of a seagull, like those who supposedly came down and did in the locusts who were destroying the crops in the days of Brigham Young. I also thought about the fact that Brigham Young and the early settlers talked about were cooperatives, which are very socialistic. If you're going to build a socialistic system, or you're going to establish socialism, racism has to be rubbed out completely. It's impossible to have a socialistic system and racism together, and maybe that is the real reason the Mormon cooperative concept wasn't able to survive. They have people like Lowell Jensen who railroad Huey to jail by changing the trial transcript. I thought that when I got inside that jail, they might treat me badly, but all they did was book me. The brothers inside that Salt Lake City jail knew that I was there for that night. The information got around. It was a very modern jail. When I say modern, I don't mean to say that I like jails, but this jail would cover a square city block. Half the jail's down underground. The tiers are built from under the ground up. I looked at the jail and I looked at the little nozzles and things around. The jail in Salt Lake City reminded me of a streamlined concentration camp, very much so. The tier I was on was 25 feet underground. There were very long aisles and very few people around me. All the doors open and closed electronically. It's a completely electronic jail. I was put in a cell by myself, isolated from other prisoners. This particular tank did not seem to have been used much. It had little skinny mattresses that went on small steel bunks riveted to the wall. I requested a shower and I got it. Then I washed my shorts, t-shirt, and socks, and later they brought me some food. The marshal was trying to be nice and went out that night and bought me a 79-cent box of chicken and a 20-cent milkshake with a few French fries thrown in. I'd been so cramped up in the car all day that I did 100 push-ups and sets of 10s to exercise and loosen myself up. It wasn't until I tried to go to sleep that I got pissed off again because I knew that I was really in a kidnap situation and I couldn't call Charles Gary in San Francisco. When I arrived at the jail, I again asked the marshal if I could call Gary and he said, "We'll see about that." But he wouldn't let me do it. The next morning, they came and completely shackled us down again. We ate breakfast in the jail before we left that morning.
So I just
After we were shackled down that morning,
I just wanted to interject to say this idea of this completely electronic jail. That's how most jails operate now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like, he was seeing the very beginning of the modernization of the prison industrial complex, and I think that his take is very valid on it. What was it? A streamlined concentration camp? I mean, pretty much.
Yep.
And the prison industrial complex exists for forced labor. The same constitutional amendment that outlawed slavery legalized it, and it's still alive and well today via our prison industrial complex.
Right. People love to forget about that when they say that slavery ended. Like only in certain forms. When you can be jailed and forced to do labor either for free or for like, you know, pennies a day, that's still slave labor.
Yeah, exactly.
So America doesn't really have that fucking pedestal of morality to sit on.
Also, if you're like reading along with this version of the book, I don't know what happened, but like about a page and a half ago, the text got like way smaller.
Super fucking tiny.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm like this with my phone, so I can even fucking read it with my blind ass over here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that.
Like,
I
wait a
feel
minute,
that
what's it
because
say?
I'm all like sitting this far away from my screen and shit. You know?
Right. Like that print got super tiny for no fucking reason. I don't know why. But
Right?
anywho, after we were shackled down that morning, we were driven all the way across the state of Wyoming. As soon as we came to the Utah-Wyoming border, the Wyoming highway patrolman got right in behind us. Those cats were really feeling their oats. I can tell when cops are itchy and trigger happy. We'd stop to eat lunch or get out to go to the toilet, and these cops would stand 20 feet away from us in a guarding position, their arms folded, ready to draw their guns. If I looked at them, they dropped their arms down to their sides. I knew they had weird notions and misconceptions about the Black Panther Party. Maybe they thought I was going to whip out a gun or something. Here I am, all shackled down and everything, three of us all hooked together. We can't move anything. And they're standing 20 feet off, ready to draw their guns. They called it security. As we drove, one of the marshals was telling me about transporting some other prisoners, 3 brothers, who asked him, "What concentration camp you taking us to?" "Why do these guys think that?" the marshal asked me. "We weren't taking them to a concentration camp. We were just transporting them from one prison to another. Where did they get these ideas?" "Well, the basic fact is the concentration camps do exist in America," I said. "There are some laws on the books that say concentration camps can still be used. They'll probably use them for the Black Panther Party." "Nah, it'll never happen," the marshal said. "America will never let black people be exterminated." "Are you kidding?" I said. "Black people have been slaughtered and murdered and lynched and brutalized for centuries. 50% of the people in prison and jails don't even need to be there. 25% are hardcore criminals who really need some type of rehabilitation. The other 25% are just sick and need really good psychological treatment in hospitals." I told him the 50% who don't need to be in prison just need jobs. There are over 1 million people in the prisons. Those are the initial concentration camps. I told him I thought that the cat was right in asking what concentration camp he was being taken to. "The southern work farms are nothing but concentration camps," I said. "Some cat down in Texas got 99 years in prison because he drew a gun in the process of holding up a store. Nobody was killed or anything like that. No shootout occurred, but because he held up a liquor store and was black, he got 99 years.
That's
Another
not
cat.
the only story like that either. There's
Right.
so many stories like that. So many. It's time to
Right.
let a lot of people out of cages. When dispensaries, and this is all this is all I'll say about it. But like when dispensaries look and operate like a fucking Apple store, it's time to let a lot of people out of jail.
Right. There's so many people still imprisoned for simple possession or even an assumption that they were planning to distribute marijuana, and they're still in fucking prison while we got other people out here literally becoming rich off of selling marijuana in a storefront. Like the frame of mind concerning drugs needs to change completely.
I think Oregon's on the right track to that. I'm just saying.
Right. Of decriminalizing shit across the board, because okay, if you have a drug addiction, you don't have a legal problem, you have a healthcare problem, and it should be addressed as such in order to help you with that addiction.
I know
But,
I already plugged it,
you
but
know.
you mentioned healthcare, so I'm just going to bring up one more time the March for Medicare for All. It's in over 52 cities across the U.S. Saturday, 10 a.m. to noon local time.
Yep, because the healthcare factor needs to be in place. And while we're at it, I'm just going to go ahead and plug also defunding the fucking police, because part of that means reallocating those funds for proper handling of certain situations. If you call 911 because you're having a heart attack, do you get a fucking cop or do you get a paramedic? You get a paramedic. So if you call 911 because somebody is looped out on fucking drugs or because they're having a mental health care issue of some other kind, you should be getting a mental health care worker, a therapist, a counselor. You should be getting people who can come out and resolve the problem with them, not people who come out and make it a bigger fucking problem, or worse yet, fucking shoot people and kill them because they don't understand what's happening with them during a mental break.
Yep.
So,
yeah,
absolutely. For those who don't understand what defunding the police is, that's what it is reallocating those funds to have proper fucking resources set up. Because there's seldom few situations where you call 911 and actually need a cop, and even fewer where they actually help.
Yeah, well said.
So,
well said.
Thank you.
In terms of like some context, look into, there's a lot of Unicorn Riot footage about it, but there's also a Facebook group about George Floyd Square. Look at the community that has been built around George Floyd Square. Look at their demands. And then tell me after what they've been through that it's, going too far.
Right. It's absolutely not going too far to reallocate funds to properly address shit. We've got too much funding going towards militarizing the fucking police, and it's fucking beyond ridiculous. That needs to be adjusted where those monies are actually going towards helping the community instead of harming the fucking community by sending a cop. Anyway, back to the book.
Hold on, before you go back to the book, I got a comment. Cigar said, if you look up funding for police versus funding for everything else, you'll find the police are exponentially more funded than most things. And the simple reason for this is they help protect the bourgeoisie's property.
Yep, that's the only reason they fucking, still have that kind of budget going towards them.
Yeah, thank you for that. That you worded it better than I was able to off the top of my head.
Right. It started with police coming into existence to hunt down runaway slaves, to protect bourgeoisie's fucking investment. And we'll use that term very loosely there because you shouldn't be allowed to buy people. Should have never been allowed to buy people. But look at what they're doing now. That's only a continuation of that. Just in different forms. Anywho. Another cat, Leotis Johnson, got 30 years in Texas because the cops found one marijuana joint in his possession. Johnson is a political prisoner too. His real crime was that he was an SNCC organizer. In prison, those guys go out and they work like dogs. They are enslaved. These are our initial concentration camps, I said. The prison system doesn't rehabilitate and doesn't really serve society. The marshal still said, I don't know what you mean talking about fascism. America's not like that.
What?
Motherfucker, yes it is. Well, it's happening right before our eyes.
Let's not forget that Nazi Germany copied off of America.
Right. That's where they got their ideas for their racist laws, from America. Well, it's happening right before our eyes, I said. It's on small scale, but it's rapidly growing. We drove all the way to Laramie. When we got there, a funny thing happened. The Laramie City Police joined right in with the two highway patrol cars, the one highway patrol car in front and the one highway patrol car in back. So as soon as we came into Laramie, two city police cars joined us. One drove in front and one came on in back. It was a real big thing with them, I guess, to have me overnight. But I have to give the old sheriff in that town credit. He didn't treat us badly. He lives at the jail with his wife and family, and they cook the food there.
No shit.
The prisoners, right, that's weird. The prisoners get the same thing that the sheriff and the police see. The jail itself was clean and roomy. We witnessed an accident from the jail window down below us. What I noticed about the police really inspired me. 3 or 4 cars collided. When the city police arrived, I saw community control of the police in action. The police knew the guys who were in the accident. They were all part of one community. Just like when we say community control the police, we want the police to live in the neighborhood that they patrol. These policemen didn't treat the people who were in the accident brutally. A couple of them were drunk and were talking loudly and foolishly. "Oh, come on, cool down," the cops said. The police didn't mess over them. Nobody was beaten or dragged off to the goddamn jail. I'm pretty sure Indians get treated rotten in Laramie, but among the white population, there was a community control of police. That's what I told those other 2 cats who were in the same cell with me. This is the first time we were in the same cell, Joe, George, and I. It was a small town county jail, so they just stuck us in together. I talked to George and Joe that night, and I told them a lot about the Black Panther Party. After hearing me, they realized that they had misconception about us. George was about 35. He was out of the South. He wasn't innately prejudiced, though, and he was interested. So we talked and transferred ideas back and forth. His misconceptions about the Panthers were from the press. At first, he actually thought we just hated white people. But he learned that we didn't, that what we hated was the brutality and corruption of the society. I even showed him where poor white people were impoverished and oppressed. Not as bad as black people, but they were impoverished and oppressed too. When I said they could actually oppose the system, he readily agreed with me. George was a righteous bank robber. He and his partner had gotten on the 10 most wanted list of the FBI. They were outright bank robbers. There aren't any other words to describe the cats. The way George ran it down, they had already been sentenced to 50 years in a federal penitentiary.
Damn.
Joe was about 21. He was a bank robber too. This kind of political conversation was quite different from the conversation they had had with other prisoners. Generally, they talked about how to pull a bank robbery or something like that. I tried to project their minds into the political situation in the society. We went into what causes a cat to be a bank robber. They agreed that this society as a whole oppresses people, that it brainwashes everyone. They agreed that racism was in this society and needed to be removed. They said they never had any misconception of supposedly being superior to black people. They even said they were surprised to find out that the Black Panther Party seemed to have an intelligent perspective about what's going on in America today. I'm pretty sure that neither of them, especially George, felt that I was a threat just because I was a Black Panther. They realized I wasn't a black racist. We talked things over and came to an understanding. The next morning, they chained us down again and we took off. We went through Colorado and passed a place called the Cooperative Farmers Association. I thought to myself, I wonder if that's anything positive, something socialistic. All the farmers in America should be in some type of cooperative. We didn't stop in Denver. We passed by the airport, and then the marshal pointed out the county jail. That's the only place these guys know. Naturally, I had been thinking about whether or not we were going to stop there. Langdon Williams and Rory Hythe, both Panther leaders from San Francisco, were in the Denver jail. They're both in on the same Connecticut charge that I'm on. They were visiting Denver, and the FBI raided the Denver Panther office and arrested them, charging them with conspiracy and murder. We stopped at a service station outside of Denver, and the marshal made a phone call. They didn't have any escort, but they let us get out, stand up, and stretch. It was kind of isolated. Big fields on the side of the service station right off the highway. And I said, how come you guys don't have an escort across Denver? He said, oh, this country here and the federal government and some other people here in Denver disagree with a few things, including the price the government pays county jails to hold federal prisoners overnight. They have some disagreements about a few things. I gave this a thought. Maybe the governor of Colorado was mad enough at the federal government not to extradite Brother Langdon Williams and Rory Hythe. We got back in the car and drove and drove. Would you like to take over for a moment?
Yeah. We went from Colorado and into Kansas. The trip took us across Nevada, Utah, north through Wyoming, down through Denver, Colorado, then east across Kansas. That's the first time I'd ever been in Kansas in my life. I don't think I've been in Kansas either. Now that I think about it. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, we finally came to a city named Hays, Kansas, and stopped at the Ellis County Jail. The jail was a large building. They put us in a cell with 3 other prisoners. We ate fried chicken, peas, everything the jailer and his family had. He lived in the jail and his wife cooked the food. He was an older cat who didn't like hippies and long hair at all, but he seemed to be a nice person. In that jail, they had TV in the tanks for the prisoners, and there were razor blades and aftershave lotion, magazines, cards, checkers, you name it, they had it. The guards wore civilian clothes. There were 4 tanks with 4 bunks in each tank and a large day room. It was a clean jail because the prisoners had painted it. You went out across the hall after you came out of the tank into the day room. Close behind the bars was a telephone. The sheriff said, if you need anything, just pick up the telephone and let me know. You could stay up as long as you wanted. It was the best jail I've been in my life. But I still hate jails. Me too, Bobby. One of the prisoners got into a conversation with me about how to make millions of dollars. They said all the hippie and yippie stuff could be profitable. Man, if that wasn't like foreshadowing of the commercialization of the counterculture. Bobby, with your organization, boy, we could really clean up, you know. He was a southern white cat. Deep down inside, I knew he was a racist the way he was relating to some wild capitalistic adventure. But that's how he'd been oriented in this society. That's how a lot of rural people, not just southerners, that's how a lot of rural people were oriented in this society. But that's another conversation altogether. The other prisoners talked about 3 black people who had recently pulled a jewel robbery in that town. Hays is a college town with only about 10 black at the school. It's a very isolated place. Some blacks were driving through the town and went into a jewelry store, and one cat picked up a pouch of jewels, went out the door, got in the car, and drove off. It wasn't an armed robbery. They were caught right away. One white guy in the jail said, man, them black guys, they sure shouldn't have done that in a place like this. I can understand doing it in Chicago or somewhere there's a whole lot of colored people, but a place like this is so isolated that they get spotted at the drop of a hat and busted. It was a big thing on TV when they got caught. That's still common in rural places today, particularly white rural areas. The next morning we had breakfast in the jail. The marshals came and we were handcuffed, double handcuffed, shackled, and chained again. We drove across Kansas all the way to Missouri. I had never really seen that type of countryside before. It was completely flat with a lot of tall corn growing throughout the area. Well, that describes Kansas, doesn't it? One of the things about traveling across the country is that you see the vast amounts of land we have. I thought about how this government continues with the private property concept with all that unused land, when there are black people, brown people, and American Indians cooped up on reservations and in ghettos. With modern technology able to irrigate and build reservoirs, why is it that black people can't have some of this land? We were promised 40 acres and 2 mules when we were freed from slavery. This was the thing that really hit me on that trip. I thought, here I am, kidnapped by the federal government, and all I'm doing is fighting for some land. I'm trying to contribute to the struggle so we can have some freedom, which is manifested in having some land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. These are the things, I thought, looking at all that tall corn grow, looking at all the vast amount of land that wasn't even being used. There are 15 million people hungry in this country. We were driving on a narrow 2-lane road in Missouri. It was raining, and I thought, what if they have a wreck? What would happen to me? I thought to myself about Everett having escaped before. He would probably try and get that gun from one of the marshals, and then he'd definitely get the handcuff keys and escape. But I didn't have to escape. I was on a political charge. If I escaped, everybody would believe I was guilty of all that jive, those trumped up charges. At the same time, I knew darn well the power structure is going to move and do everything they can to try to convict me and railroad me into prison in the electric chair. We finally arrived at the federal medical facility. As we drove in, they stopped us by this little microphone through which a cat talked sitting in a tower 20 feet above us. While they unlatched Joe, a guy with an M1 rifle stood above us. One of the local marshals came outside and got him, and they took him through a basement. Then the marshals got back in the car and drove on over to the county jail. This was the dirtiest, filthiest jail I've ever been in. The sheriff was an old cat with an old gun slung off his hip. I had never seen such a filthy place. When I say filthy, you have to imagine what I'm describing, and I'm not exaggerating 1 pound. The cells had crud in all the corners and an inch and 2 inches thick. It smelled like it'd been there for years. The bunks were only 2 feet wide with little mattresses that were ripped open and filthy with bugs crawling all over them. You could knock some bugs off, you'd look down at your hand and there was some more bugs. When they hand you your food, there's flies and shit in it. It looks like slop. It was just a rundown, filthy, no good, dirty jail. A place that almost made me vomit.
That's fucking disgusting.
Yeah. Holy fuck, man. I don't even know what to say to that. I hope that those types of conditions don't still exist in jails, but it has not been that bad anywhere I've been.
The worst I can complain about is getting handed a blanket covered in fucking pubes at Genesee County. I was like, ew, I'm not using that. Not using that at all. But they make the inmates clean the cells out every day, disinfecting the fuck out of everything so that it doesn't get cruddy like what he's describing. But they still do disgusting shit. You shouldn't be giving somebody a blanket that ain't been fucking washed from the last person or persons that used it.
Right.
But anyway.
In the raggedy little jail, the guards didn't bother us. The trustees wore blue jeans and t-shirts. The other prisoners had their regular civilian clothes and had to sleep in them. There weren't any blankets, no blankets at all. About 4 or 5 trustees gathered up in front of the cell that me and George had been put up in. They asked us who we were and where we were going. Most of them seemed amazed at George's adventures and would ask him questions. They asked me who I was, and I told them I was Bobby Seale. They didn't know the name. And then George said, "This is Bobby Seale, the chairman of the Black Panther Party." "A Black Panther? Hey, fella, are you really a Black Panther?" "Yeah, man, I'm a Black Panther. I'm a member of the party." "Gosh, those guys that got the guns and shoot at the police," one white trustee said.
Oh, God. You mean shoot back?
Right.
Like, let's be clear.
I know a fella here who's a Panther. He didn't take nothing from nobody around here, and boy, he shot it out with them cops. I tell you, man, I'd be out there too if they got to messing with me like they mess with y'all. That's not where I thought this conversation was going to go at all, actually.
Right.
I heard they really mess with y'all. He seemed to be on this vicarious relationship trip about some weird stuff he'd probably read in the sensationalized local papers. Another trustee got to talking about how he was doing 30 days and how he'd lost his hog farm and his wife was having a baby. He was in there for pushing a lollipop down the mouth of one of his kids. What the fuck does that even mean?
Like trying to choke him with it, or what? What the fuck?
Right. I'm really confused at that. There were 2 more prisoners in our cell. One black brother was getting ready to be sent to the penitentiary for 3 years. He had committed a burglary, got cut loose on the first one, and when he needed some money, he went back and committed another burglary. I just want to interject here to say that at least 90% of crime comes down to poverty. If you want to address crime, address people's material conditions first.
Right. That's the root of all of it.
Right.
Don't care whether it's robbing banks or selling drugs or stealing cars. That's because of poverty. If people weren't living in fucking poverty, they wouldn't be reaching for ways like that to acquire things just to satisfy basic material conditions.
Exactly. He had heard about the Panthers, and I tried to talk to him about the party a bit. There wasn't a chapter in his town. I was told there are quite a few black people in that town, but a lot of them go to jail because there aren't a lot of jobs around. That goes back to what we were just saying. He also said there was a lot of racism and police brutality. There was another tank where they kept juveniles. They separated them from the other prisoners, who was mainly just regular, everyday poor white cats, southern type cats, who still don't understand the fact that the power structure oppresses them. I'm looking at you, rural, poor Donald Trump voters.
Right. Looking directly at you. Fuck.
The next morning, I noticed I was scratching and itching. Bugs were all over my body, and I had to shake my shirt out. It was probably, actually, he says it was crabs. I was going to guess that it was bed bugs. Later on in Cook County, I found out I had caught the crabs at that filthy jail.
Time to shave everything. Right? Shave everything.
Shave everything. Our next stop was the St. Louis City Jail, where the marshals left me for an hour and a half. Shave everything.
Yes, everything. Everything. Crack your ass and all.
The place was crowded with black cats. About 150 of them were being processed. While I was getting out of the car in front of the jail, I could see prisoners hollering down at the people walking outside on the sidewalk. One of the cats said, "Black power, brother," to me. A white man was walking along there in the city, and the same prisoner hollered, "Where you going, Hanky?" I knew that these brothers were getting turned into black racists. They still didn't understand. That sounded like he hated the white man because of the color of his skin. Brothers like that lash out emotionally in a racist manner before they realize the necessity for politically organizing the people. We're all products of this racist society and need more revolutionary consciousness. I just want to say salafucking-darity to that.
Goddamn right.
Joy said that's why Batman sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a bougie ass motherfucker.
Yeah.
All that money, and what was he doing to actually help poor people other than his children's home? He could have done so much more than just building fly ass fucking cars to fight poor people robbing banks like the Joker. But anyway.
Inside, they had
Batman.
some Uncle Tom type cops helping to run the jail, processing in all kinds of black cats. There were very few white prisoners in the St. Louis jail. I've heard that the St. Louis jail system is still quite racist, so I guess I'm not at all surprised to hear that they were racist 50 years ago.
St. Louis sucks. It's because of that city that I don't call that state Missouri. I call it misery. Anyway,
one brother in my cell asked who I was. He wondered why I brought him to the jail, or why I was brought to the jail in leg irons, shackles, double handcuffs, and a chain around my waist. I told him that's the way you travel when you're a federal prisoner. He kept asking me what my charge was until I had to tell him I was Bobby Seale, chairman of the Black Panther Party. At first, he didn't believe me because he said, "Oh man, you're trying to jive somebody." I said, "No man, I'm the chairman of the Black Panther Party. I don't go out and brag that I'm chairman of the Black Panther Party or anything like that." But this brother, being a disbeliever, I talked to him. After a while, he was kind of believing, but he was still unsure. He had been busted for possession of some stolen property of some kind. I talked to him and some of the other brothers in there. They seemed to be really out of it. I haven't ever been in a jail down south, but there was something about that jail that gave me the feeling that I was in the South. The brothers' ways and attitudes weren't in connection with anything on the West Coast, New York, or Chicago. The average cat has heard of the Black Panther Party, whereas these other guys just look at you. It's something they don't have any information on. I think that their information is so limited, so narrow, that they have to have a tendency to look at the Black Panther Party as something far-fetched, something that they're not going to be involved with because they'd assume they'd probably go to jail. One of the brothers I was talking to said, man, most of these cats down there, they're out of it, man. They don't know where it's at yet, man. That was the brother's opinion, and that brother lived in St. Louis. I was there less than 2 hours when the two marshals came up. They wrapped a chain around my waist and put on just one set of handcuffs, attached the handcuffs to the chain around my waist, and put me in the back seat of a car. I was the last one. While they left me off in St. Louis, they took George onto one of those maximum security places, and then they drove me north to Chicago.
Can you give me your dope-ass announcer voice again?
Cook County Jail.
Thank
So
you.
I'm thinking this will probably be the last section for the night, because we're coming up on about an hour and a half now, but we had a 15-minute video at the beginning, so you know this one's going to be a little bit longer.
Okay, sounds good to me. We arrived in Chicago at about 7:30 that evening and went straight to Cook County Jail. Inside the jail, they pat searched me and took me downstairs. The assistant superintendent, a white cat, started telling me on the way downstairs that he had gotten to know Fred Hampton very well while Fred was in jail there one time. I asked the cat what his job was. He told me he used to be a police officer in charge of gang intelligence. Naturally, I didn't trust him one bit. So instead of offending him, I just let him go on and present himself to see what his attitude really was. He went on to say that he had liked Brother Fred Hampton very much. I was not impressed. That sounded like gang intelligence work. He took me downstairs into a hall, and there's Black Cat standing there. I heard that there was a black man who ran the jail. Moore was his name. He was the head superintendent there, and they called him Warden Moore. Moore told the assistant, bring him in here. I want to talk to him. So I walked into the little room.
And now we're
He said, sit down over there in the chair. I sat down in the chair. Now look here, he said, like he was supposed to be very tough. I'm the warden of this jail and I run this jail. You've got a lot of notoriety and we don't want any trouble in this jail. I looked at him and I said, very straight, very directly, I know you don't want me to organize in your jail. Most people don't want me organizing in their jails when I'm there. Moore said, we haven't got any Panthers in this jail. We haven't got any Muslims in this jail. We haven't got any gang members in this jail. We got inmates. You understand that? Yes, I answered. I also understand that I'm still the chairman of the Black Panther Party. I want my cell and my legal papers so that I can work on some legal matters. Moore said, you'll get your cell all right. Another guard came in. A black cat took me into another section where they do the booking. They strip searched me, then gave me my clothes back. I noticed there were a lot of black guards at Cook County Jail. After this procedure was finished, they had some sheets of paper that I had to fill out. One for my property and for receiving mail, and one for listing all my assets. Or listing all my arrests. Sorry, tiny print. The last one is called a rap sheet. I took the sheets and started filling it out. I didn't have to give this information to them, and the average cat should just flat take the Fifth Amendment and refuse to give any such information. But in my case, I knew that this kind of information is already known by every FBI agent, so it would have been silly to refuse to run it down. Well, the next thing I knew, about 30 black guards crowded around and began to ask me questions about all the past arrests I had. I guess they were curious from having heard so many lies in the newspaper. So really enthusiastically, they gathered around to hear what I would tell about what had happened in the past, about what they would call my criminal record. Some of them seemed to think I had been arrested for some vicious, vicious crimes. When I mentioned that I had been arrested for having a gun adjacent to a jail, there were oohs and ahs and expressions towards each other, as if they thought that this must have been some fantastic feat or criminal act that I was trying to pull, which was not the case at all. The fact was, this was right after one of the times Huey had gotten busted. At the time of Huey's arrest, we were carrying weapons, and I was waiting outside the jail for him on a public sidewalk with a shotgun in my hands. The next day, I was arrested. These were the kind of things they didn't know. The fact that I wasn't even arrested initially, that I wasn't trying to break anybody out of jail. We just carried the guns in the open at the time to show the people that it was legal to carry these guns and that we would defend ourselves. We had been on the streets with guns for 6 or 7 months by that time, and the cops hadn't arrested us because they couldn't find anything to charge us with until we happened to get too near a county jail. So I explained to the guards, don't look at that like it's something fantastic. It's perfectly legal for a person to arm himself and have a shotgun. We just got too near a county jail. They looked at me skeptically and said, "Aw, come on now. What else have you been arrested for? Come on, what else?" I realized that they didn't know any of the facts about my arrests at all. Just that there had been a lot of these arrests, and they made a long list on the rap sheet looking very sensational. They wanted to know, who is this Bobby Seale person who has all this notoriety? Most of them were thinking I was really just a gangbanger, stuff like this, which I wasn't at all. I'd never been a gang leader. I was just another cat who grew up in the community. But they were looking for a lot of theft and other bad things. So I told them I'd run it all down in detail, but I wouldn't say anything about any case that was still pending. Anything they wanted to know from the past, I'd freely tell them. I'd been arrested 5 times in the last 2 years on major things that were trumped up by the government to try and put me in jail. But other than that, before these past years, before the Black Panther Party, there was nothing more serious than traffic warrants. Since the party was founded, there was guns on the grounds adjacent to a county jail charge. Then my wife and I were both arrested for possession of illegal weapons. The initial charge on that was a so-called kind of conspiracy to commit murder, which they had to drop the next day. The guards grabbed onto that. "Why'd they drop it?" they asked. "What do you mean? What happened then?" But I wouldn't go any further into that because it's still pending on appeal. Then there was the bust in Sacramento, and then the Chicago thing, and then the Connecticut murder charge, which hasn't come to court yet. These are all my arrests. Finally, the guards were satisfied. I was ready to be taken up to my cell. A black guard who knew Oakland told me he was taking me up, and I told him I wanted my own cell. I explained that I could work better that way. He said, "Yeah, man, I'll make sure you get a place where you can work and do your things." As we walked to my cell, he talked about Oakland, but it was like we were talking about 2 different places because he hadn't been there for a long time. He was a lieutenant. One thing I found amongst those black guards was that even though they were being used by the system to check and corral their own black brothers, half of them were doing it just for the sake of having a job. There's so much unemployment in the black community that regular everyday cats will take a job as a guard just to be able to get by.
And
Some of the older
that
cats
also ties into what we were talking about with poverty.
Right.
Like a lot of black officers only took that job to begin with just to be able to get by.
Right. It's like, how low are you willing to go for some money just to fucking survive and shit when it's making you a traitor to your own community? And I say that to all cops. Not,
Right.
not just, all of them. Like, you're serving as a traitor to your community. You're not helping solve crime. You're protecting bourgeoisie. And ain't nobody taking a cop job on a cop salary when they're actually bourgeoisie. So
Right.
think about that. It's all poor class, working class people taking these jobs. Anywho, some of the older cats and a few others try to play policemen and be tough. They're so brainwashed they can't see beyond the man's system. But this one cat, this lieutenant, happened to have grown up in Berkeley and Oakland with me when I was younger. He remembered the same people I remembered at Berkeley High. When I was working in the poverty program, way before the Black Panther Party was even formed, he was the head of a local poverty program. But he was the type of cat that's just going to take him a job, get a position, and not really be that concerned with black people and black America and the struggle. Some places in the jail, I saw some filth around the walls that really needed cleaning. When we got to my cell, I was relieved to see that it wasn't filthy around the walls and floor. The cell was a maximum holding cell, tiny, certainly not comfortable, but at least it was empty and clean. The guard left and I went to sleep. You stuck it here? Got you on. Oh my goodness. The next morning, that's not where was just the way I'm sitting. I'm not breathing deeply enough, so the yawns occasionally hit me. The next morning, Warden Moore came to pay me a call. I heard some steps. Somebody was walking down the hall, trying to be very quiet. I sat with my back to the steel door. I remembered the sound it had made the night before when the guard pushed the button to open it. Very loud, very startling. A good way to scare a person and make him jump. A good way for a soft-stepping warden to intimidate a prisoner by startling him and putting him on the defensive. Sure enough, the soft steps stopped. Blam! My door opened. I waited for a few seconds and then looked around slowly. It was Warden Moore. He stared hard at me and then said rather arrogantly, "How you doing?" "I'm doing fine, Warden. How are you doing?" I answered. I was just sitting sort of casually on the top bunk. He looked at the papers I had spread around me and, nodding at them, demanded, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm thinking about my legal matters, working on that stupid trumped-up charge there," and I pointed to a legal document that Gary had given me. "What charge is that?" Moore sort of growled. I handed him the charge from Connecticut. He looked at it and read it. Then he handed the paper back to me and stepped back, putting his hands on his belt, trying to look authoritative. "We got over 2,000 prisoners in this jail," he announced. "We run this jail just fine. We got over 90% black guards in this jail." "Good," I said. "In fact, I was surprised to see that many black people running a jail." He cleared his throat. "You want to go outside?" he asked. "It doesn't make any difference," I told him. "I can be locked up, or I can go outside, or I can just stay right here." Then he said I could go watch television if I wanted to with some trustees. "No thanks," I told him. "I don't have to watch TV. I'd just as soon stay locked up right in here." He stared at me for a few seconds. He looked a little confused when I said that, and then he turned and left. That was a little trick I learned from Huey. Huey would upset the guards in jail. Huey understood the guards. He knew that psychologically, most guards couldn't stand to be locked up. Most believed they would go mad if they had to be locked up. So what Huey would do is, when they put him in the day room, all of a sudden he would jump up and say, "Hey, officer, come here and lock me back up in my cell." He pulled a reverse on them. Where most prisoners would do nearly anything to get out of their cells and into the day room, Huey would say, "Lock me up in my cell." Huey said the guards are really the ones who fear jail and fear the things that they do there, because they would fear being in the same situation as the prisoners. The worse they treat the prisoners, the more they fear. That's the mind of the establishment. There were other experiences Huey had told us about to help us deal with the situations we would find in jail. One time, a long time ago, before the Black Panther Party, Huey was put in the hole. They brought him some mush in a cup for him to eat and some water. The mush was green, so he took the stuff and threw it out the porthole, and then got down and started doing push-ups. He was already in the hole, the worst punishment to have. They couldn't put him anywhere else. The most they could do is come in and brutalize him. So they did. They actually came in and beat the shit out of Huey. About 2 days after that, the guard who came around on the night shift turned out to be an old friend of Huey's. They hadn't seen each other for years until this guard came down and found Huey in the hole. He sneaked in some sandwiches down to Huey. After that, every night when this guard would come on the night shift, Huey could eat. Then in the day when the other guards came down, Huey would be doing push-ups. Every day he'd throw the food back and say, "I don't want that crap. That's not fit for human beings to eat." Huey went on like that for 10 days. It was blowing the guards' minds. Finally, one of the guards said, "How do you do this?" Huey said, "The spirit of the people is stronger than the man's jail. My spirit is stronger than yours." That's the kind of thing Huey pulled off in jail, even before the Black Panther Party was organized. So from the ways he taught me to deal with the jail experience, I was able to deal with Warden Moore. Of course, that doesn't mean that I like jail. I abhor it. I'm pissed off at it. But I learned to take jail, and I let the guards know that being locked up doesn't change my revolutionary spirit. And usually, when the guards discover this, they became quite interested in the philosophy of the Black Panther Party and come around asking questions, asking me to run down the 10-point platform. That's how it happens, what Warden Moore calls organizing.
That's
the next
exactly
couple
what
of-
it is fucking organizing.
Right. Right.
We need that kind of organization. Like, I mean, just to point out again, you know, like Fred Hampton's Rainbow Coalition that Bobby Seale was talking about in the video that we watched at the beginning of this, that's what scared the power structure.
Yeah, because they were seeing everybody come together. They knew that if the entire working class and poor came together, united under a single front, that they would not be able to hold on to the establishment as it is. So they tried to squash it one section at a time, one group at a time, targeting people and throwing them in prison on false fucking charges to try to break apart that unity, you know? It was ridiculous, but that's the only way that they could actually, you know, try to control that uniting that was going on there and try to put a stop to it. Fuck, they put MLK in the ground for bringing together the poor people's movement in the first place.
Right. Well, he didn't really threaten the power structure until the Poor People's Campaign.
Uh-huh. That right there was the straw that broke the camel's back. They were like, oh, shit. Can't have that.
I gotta shut the back door and put the dogs in so I can let the garbage out.
That's fine. In the next couple of days, I wrote a number of letters. I felt that I was isolated from everything that was going on the West Coast, being in Chicago. So I wrote letters home to communicate. One of the guards came around and told me to fill out this thing to my lawyer, and I'd be able to get in touch with him right away. I filled that out, and the guard promised to mail it back immediately. By now, the guards realized that I wasn't either a mad killer or a fool, as the papers depict all Black Panther Party members. The second day, I felt something crawling on me and realized I had caught the crabs. The only place that I could trace it to was that filthy county jail in Missouri that I had to stay at all night, one night. So I went and got completely soaked down with DDT all through my hair and my natural, everything. Right, just shave everything, god damn it. I had that stuff running off me like water. And that's horrible. That's horrible. What we know now about DDT, like, oh my fucking god. No, I should have just handed him a razor and some shaving cream. The next Tuesday morning, they took me out saying I was going to court. Actually, we ended up going to the federal building in Chicago. On the way, I saw Jerry Rubin. I hardly recognized him at first, with his hair all cut off. We stood in the federal processing tank in Cook County Jail for 2 hours and got to talk for a while. Jerry told me he was being kept in a tier across the hall from me, but Cook County Jail is so huge that it's like being in another jail. Cook holds as many prisoners as they do in some of the major prisons. I found out that Jerry had to stay in jail until 25 days were up. He was serving the time for blocking a Navy recruiting table in Berkeley. Jerry told me that...
Fuck, man, for blocking a recruiting table?
Right, like, oh my god, what a crime. Really?
Wow.
That's some reactionary bullshit right there. Jerry told me Warden Moore had been down the aisle that morning, hassling him a little, and it said, Bobby Seale is an Uncle Tom. I laughed and said, oh man, ain't this a gas? The other day he was treating me like I was the most notorious criminal in the world. Now that he's found out I'm not a notorious criminal, I'm an Uncle Tom. Well, we can't expect Warden Moore to understand the positives of revolutionary principles. Then I told Jerry how Warden Moore had sought me out in the aisle that same morning. Bobby Seale, he had called out. Jerry Rubin said he would get you to beat me up. I said, Jerry Rubin might say anything. He might say he's going to get Westmoreland to jump on Nixon. Jerry laughed at that. And then Moore himself came inside the tank. He sat down and began talking about how SDS runs the Black Panther Party. I said, "You're crazy, man." He said, "It's true, they do." I said, "I don't know what kind of papers you've been reading." Moore was walking around inside the tank, not in a uniform, but in civilian clothes. Now, just outside the tank, they process guys who are going to court. Many of them don't have handcuffs on, but everyone knows they're prisoners going to court. The way Moore was sitting there, a man had no way of knowing that he was the superintendent of the jail. This cat who was getting processed for court saw Moore sitting there smoking a cigarette, so he said, "Hey man, can I get a cigarette from you?" I realized the prisoner had mistaken Moore for another prisoner, and the look of outrage on Moore's face just cracked me up laughing. Moore looked real mean at the cat and said in a very harsh tone, "I advise you, young man, not to say one more damn thing to me." The cat looked at Moore and then at me. He didn't understand this at all. Moore just turned back to me and started talking. I found out that Moore did this a lot. He'd go walking around the jail in civilian clothes. In Cook County Jail, all the prisoners wear civilian clothes and all the guards wear uniforms. Moore going around wearing an old t-shirt and some pants. You'd swear up and down he's a prisoner. Therefore, a lot of prisoners going to court and coming back from court won't even know who he is. They may not be very careful of what they say around him. Moore has a PhD in psychology and sociology. He figures people will always react in a certain way, so he's developed all kinds of methods of getting whatever reaction on information he wants from a prisoner. I was hip to his methods, so they didn't work on me.
So, like,
The
I
next
just want
day-
to interject here. I know we're almost done, but, like, imagine going to school to get a PhD to work in a jail.
Right. Like, what the fuck, guy?
Right?
Like, how does that even... Anyway, it's not like you went for a degree in, like, criminal justice or anything. Nope, psychology and sociology. Bro, you should have been a shrink or something instead, but I guess that wouldn't have appealed to his desire for authoritarian control over other people.
Right.
Maybe he should have psychoanalyzed himself. Anyway, the next day, Wednesday, I found that I had developed an infection in my testes. The doctor examined me and said that I must be put in the hospital for some treatments. I was moved out of my cell and into the hospital ward. That's fucked up, man. Like, and again, probably another something that he caught from the jails. But that's the end of that section, and we are running just on 2 hours now. So I guess we can break there.
So we'll be
Make
picking it
note
back
of
up
page
next Thursday
181.
at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. At page 181, the chapter "My Constitutional Rights Are Denied." I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight.
Same.
Unless something crazy happens that we end up doing an impromptu live stream over the weekend, we won't be seeing you guys until Monday. But if you haven't had a chance, you can catch up on things that we've published through the week. Of course, Monday we had a current event stream. Tuesday we did part 1 of the Communist Manifesto. Tuesday will be part 2, which is going to be picking up on page 20 of the paper book. I'm not sure what that is in the PDF, but it's chapter 2, Proletarians and Communists. Wednesday this week we did the AFL-CIO piece. Next Wednesday we'll be doing Emma Goldman. And then, of course, next Thursday will be part 11 of this series. Emily said, you could have just stopped at, imagine going to school to get a PhD.
Right.
She says
That
that
alone
because
is over
she's going to
enough.
school to get a PhD.
Right. She knows that.
Yeah.
Fuck, it's so much work. So much work. So stressful and
So-
expensive.
On our website for wearemany.org, right now we have a couple of things that I've been trying to push around. We have a copy paste thing telling our elected officials to get their hands off Cuba. That's been up for about a week and a half now. We have an article with links to the page with the events for the March for Medicare for All. That is this Saturday, 10 to 12, 10 a.m. to noon local time, wherever you're at. There's probably a march near you. What was the other one? Oh yeah, the strike fund. I was able today to locate a strike fund for the striking Frito-Lay workers in Topeka, Kansas. And well, there's a small
Did you
article.
already?
Yeah, I already published it. There's a small article that I wrote with it. Well, I didn't write much, honestly. It's the statement from the president of their union, of the national union. And then, of course, I included the link to the donation page, as well as the link to the Facebook page, where you can go express your support directly to them.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I recommend that everybody goes to forwearemany.org. That's the most comprehensive way to catch up. But of course, all of this is posted on our Facebook. Let's see, what else do we got? I don't know. I think that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah. I can't think of anything you missed there. That was
Do you
pretty
have
thorough.
any articles or anything in the works by chance?
Not yet, but there's some stuff that I've been tossing around that I need to do a little bit more research on. So I'll have another article to kick out on the site pretty soon here. I don't know. Other than that, just been juggling between trying to catch up on pre-recording stuff and getting posters made. So yeah, you'll see that other piece come out soon as I'm able to take that time to sit down and go through all of that research I've been pulling. This is something I've been researching for a month and a half. I'm not gonna give it away right now, but I think everybody will enjoy it.
Indeed.
Yeah. Digging into one of the darkest holes of American society.
Well, you know, there's a few of those.
Right, there's so many. Just leave you wondering for a minute till you see it pop up on the page. Build some intrigue. Don't mind me. But yeah. There's our website right there, www.forwearemany.org. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. If you'd like to support what we're doing, you can find us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/forwearemany.
There's
And
also
if
a
you'd like
PayPal
to-
link on our website.
Oh, dope. Yes, I saw that earlier when I was checking through the library. We're in the process.
I
of
forgot that
building.
Dean had done that, actually.
Yeah. Hell yeah. If you'd like to contribute in any way, whether it be writing, video, helping with management, hit us up at forwearemanypodcast@gmail.com or message us on Facebook. Either one works.